Excellent.
Okay, thank
Thank
you.
you so much. Good afternoon, everybody, behind the scenes, in front of the scenes, and wherever you all are. And thank you for joining us. We've got Caroline, good afternoon. And we've got Joel in from America again. Hello, Joel, good morning. And we've got some questions coming up. Right, I'm going to hit you with a nice, easy question, okay?
Good.
I had PBC hundreds of millions of years on or so beta fibrates, bilirubin A, ALT 17, alkaline phosphatase 78, gamma DT 100, all fine. AFP, alpha FP 10, and that's unchanged for 4 readings. Consultant seems happy with that. I don't know what the AFP is. I think it's a cancer marker, isn't it?
Yes. So AFP is alpha fetoprotein, and it is a blood marker which can be suggestive of liver cancer, primary liver cancer. Now, most liver cancers are secondaries from bowel or somewhere like that, but you can get what are called primary liver cancers, and they typically develop in people with cirrhosis and are commonest in men with cirrhosis, in liver disease in general. They are, however, the disease with the lowest level of them is PBC, because it just doesn't seem to particularly cause cancer. We do see occasional numbers. So men with viral hepatitis have the most, women with PBC have the least. And if you don't have cirrhosis, then it's really vanishingly uncommon. The level of 10 is normal. In truth, it's not that useful. And it's one of the reasons why if people have cirrhosis, we do an ultrasound scan every year. But for PBC, this is not nowhere near as big an issue as it is with other forms of liver disease. But if you have got cirrhosis, it's well worth having it done and having an ultrasound.
Okay, right. Thank you. My bloods were normal apart from a gamma GT. I knew I was AMA positive, so kept pushing to get a liver biopsy as I was so tired and sore. People thought I was mad, but it confirmed PBC. I get that. Fatigue is my worst symptom for 2 years. Any fatigue surviving tips? Now, before I let David answer, I'm going to say absolutely 100%. I've been having a wee email exchange with David. Dave and I were involved in a seminar over in the States, talking to the FDA and pharma last Friday. And fatigue came up. I was quite surprised that people hadn't bought into the less you do, the less you're able. Movement is medicine. Very surprised. So yes, there's lots of tips with fatigue, but initially, don't be going to bed. Don't give into it. I'm not saying join a gym, but I'm saying do some forms of exercise, something enjoyable. Put music on. I like my 60s music. Sing around the house as I'm faffing around. But yeah, absolutely, movement is medicine. But that's something I think David and we need to chat about this. I was a bit shocked at some of the things I saw on the screen. And in this day and age, because in the old days, when I was diagnosed, we were told to rest. Well, that's the very last thing that we should be told to do. And so it's finding that line. But David, I'm going to let you comment on this.
Okay, so yes, I agree with all of that. So fatigue is something that needs a very proactive approach to it. So the first thing to say is, as Collette has absolutely said, this is a real part of PBC. It is the biggest problem for a significant number of people with PBC, and it's the thing that is most neglected by clinicians managing PBC. And it's for those of you who know me, rather like Collette, I'm a reasonably tenacious individual, and we never give up making the point again and again and again. And for 10 plus years, we've been making this point that what matters to patients is what matters, not what matters to the doctors. And far too much is that, oh, well, your blood tests are fine, off you go, you're fine. But hang on a second, I can't do X, Y, and Z because of my symptoms. Well, your symptoms can't be because of PBC, because your blood tests are fine, all of which is completely and utterly wrong and illogical. So we're fighting a constant battle to get people to get it. And I think it was an eye-opener, actually. I mean, my take-home from the FDA meeting, that's really important because it's about, that's about how you do trials to approve new drugs and what matters to patients. So the FDA Food and Drug Administration in America, very important, very influential. And they need to hear what matters to people. And the message came through loud and clear, and we all, assisted with that you have to take the symptoms really seriously. And I think that was a very powerful, part of it all. So PBC fatigue, is it okay if we spend a little bit of time on this? Because this is so important.
This is very important.
It's worthy of a little bit of an explanation, I think, where we're all collectively going with all of this. One thing that's worth saying is that there are people who get this and who support and appreciate the importance of it. And I'm delighted to say we now have a dedicated clinic for fatigue in PBC. It's the only one in the world, and it starts on Monday, this next Monday. And it's both to help and support people, but it's also to make a point, which is, so as far as we know, it's the first in the world. Myself and Kath Houghton, who many people who've been to Newcastle will know, is one of our specialist nurses who's really interested in how we do structured help for people. So that's a big step forward. So it's something I've wanted to do for many years, and I'm really grateful to my own organisation for supporting developing that. So it's open for referrals from anyone. It's an NHS clinic, of course, and so people can be referred to it by their GPs from anywhere. So
is that Scotland too, David? Sorry to interrupt.
Well, when I say anywhere, I was taking a very English view. So the problem is to do with cross-border referrals. So anywhere in England, if a GP refers, we can happily see people, and it's a little bit more nuanced. So the issue for Scotland is whether or not they accept this as a highly specialised clinical service. Now, I would argue, given it's the only one in the world, it's pretty highly specialised, and so therefore I would argue, but that can create issues, and I tend not to try not to get involved in those. Sure. So, but that's what we're doing with it, and the reason for doing it is that you need to take a structured approach. So what we don't have is a tablet that we can give you that will make this go away. So for itch, to a large degree, we have that. I know some people it works better than in others, but there are tablets we can give people, and that's what you need to do. And as yet, we don't have a tablet for fatigue, and so therefore what we do is about treating it in other ways. Now those other ways can be very effective, but it's a little bit more nuanced than just giving somebody a prescription. On the prescription front, one of the reasons for our new clinic is that this is where future drug trials are going to be. So I think there is a really exciting future about specific therapies for it. And we've mentioned before, we have a thing called the Oaks trial running for people with a brain fog type of fatigue. And again, there is opportunity for people to get involved in that, and the foundation are working with us on that and know a lot about it. But there is a lot of work going on about what trials will look like, and that's because there are drugs coming. So hang in there in terms of the specific therapies. Now, when you manage fatigue, that we do it in 4 stages. Well, I'll tell you exactly what we do. So this is for, and I run through this, I've got a giant pile of these papers for Monday because we run through this with people, and we have a thing that we call TRACE, okay? And it's TR, A, C, and E. So TR is treat what you can treat that's making this worse. So PBC, we see a lot of people with thyroid disease. So thyroid disease makes you tired. So if you've got a underactive thyroid, look for it, treat it. If you've got anemia, we can get sort of celiac disease or pernicious anemia. That makes you fatigued. Look for it and treat it. So this is treating all the other things that are part of it and might have been missed. The other big one is night itch. So where people itch at night, sleep is affected. And so again, that's a very effective thing to do. So before you embark on the PBC stuff, then you treat the other things that are going on. The A is to ameliorate. What do I mean by that? Well, there are 3 things that happen in PBC patients that seem to go along with fatigue, okay? And when you treat them, that improves the fatigue. So they're part of this. They're not the fatigue, but they're kind of part of it. And those three things, the first of them is sleep abnormality. We kind of introduced that with itch. So people often sleep poorly, and if you can get people sleeping properly, then you can make a big difference. So what makes people sleep poorly? Well, people with PBC just can sleep poorly, but little tips, avoid caffeine containing drinks in the evening. They keep people awake. Avoid stimulant drugs of various different types in the evening. It's a wonderfully British thing. If you're awake in the middle of the night, what do? You go downstairs, you make a cup of tea. Tea contains caffeine and it keeps you awake. It's mad. But people do it. My wife does it. I wouldn't say my wife is mad because
she'll kill you.
But you know what I mean? It's just avoid, I would never drink caffeine after 6 o'clock in the evening because I can't sleep with it. Watch out for things like Red Bull. Red Bull is caffeine with a tin around it. Okay, so just watch out for all of those things. We do send people to sleep clinics to get proper sleep assessment because there are experts in sleep. As a rule of thumb, this is a slightly thing that's difficult to raise because many PBC patients are ladies and they don't like to talk about snoring. But if you snore, it may suggest that there's a problem with your airway and your sleeping, and that's the sort of thing sleep clinics are very good. So the question we ask is of partners is, do you snore? Because that tends to be part of it. So sleep is a big focus, and if in doubt, sleep clinic.
And there's hot flushes for those of us
yes.
in that aged bracket as well.
Yes. And interestingly, just somebody's put in the comment box about drinking Coke. Does that make PBC worse? No, but it makes the fatigue worse because it gets in the way of sleeping. Okay, so Coke is like Red Bull, is like, other energy drinks are available, and it's like, tea and coffee. So just watch out for that. The second of these things is autonomic dysfunction. So PBC patients often have a problem with regulating blood pressure. It's a bit haywire. It's very up, it's very down, so it's very jagged. And what happens is, and that's to do with disease, what happens often is that doctors kind of measure it when it's high and they put people on blood pressure tablets, which actually make the lows really low. So a giveaway with this is if you feel dizzy when you stand up, you feel a bit lightheaded. Often if you get up to go to the loo in the middle of the night, sometimes people can feel a bit dizzy then. Watch out for that. That's an indication your blood pressure is sagging a little bit. In simple terms, if your blood pressure drops, it doesn't perfuse the muscles properly. And so you get a muscle kind of hypo sort of perfusion effect. My colleague Julia Newton wrote a lot on this and that pioneered many of the treatments. If you do have a problem with blood pressure or autonomic or a question about this, then there are very specialized clinical services available everywhere. They're usually called falls and syncope clinics or dizziness clinics or falls clinics. And that's because obviously if your blood pressure drops far, if you have a fall, and so there's a whole clinical practice about investigating it. So it's really simple to do. They have very clever computerized blood pressure machines that can tell you whether there's a likelihood of all of this. So again, well worth a referral for it. Actually, the treatment is usually very simple. If people are on too much blood pressure treatment, we reduce that. And the other one is just making sure you drink plenty of fluid. So, but
can we go back to the fluid bit? This is a really important point that you raise, because somebody came in last week and they're having a bit dizziness and they have 2 cups of tea a day, 2 cups of coffee. We absolutely are a nation of prunes, and this, we need to drink water. Particularly, we all do, good man. Just to it's so important. It really is important. And if you're dehydrated, your fatigue, you will drop like a stone.
Yes, I absolutely couldn't agree more. We all underdrink water for a variety of reasons. We all then tend, sit in hot buildings and get dehydrated. And literally, it's just think of it. It's like the brake pedal in the car. If the brake system is half full of, is only half full of brake fluid, it doesn't work. So the simplest way is to make sure you drink plenty. It keeps the circulation up. And you'll be peeing more, but that's the whole point. We need to just make sure. And actually, it's a really effective thing. So Julia's rule of thumb was 2 liters before lunch. Okay, 2 liters of water before lunch, and You know,
what's that in pints, David? So
what's that in pints?
about
It's
4?
about four pints before
Right,
before lunch. Okay.
Yeah.
And then there are some more sophisticated treatments around it, but most people it's simple stuff. And then the third of these associated things is depression. Now, this creates a lot of controversy, and I'll be very clear: depression does not cause the fatigue of PBC. Okay, be really clear. I don't mean that, and it's a really unhelpful thing when people make that assumption. However, people with PBC and fatigue can get depressed because they feel frustrated and they don't know where this is all going, and it adds to it. And actually, if it's adding to it, then treating that is helpful about getting people heading in the right direction. Okay. And this concept of dynamics is really important, because what we're aiming for in the clinic is to make next week a little bit better than this week, because then you'll feel able to do more, and then you will feel a little bit better the week after and a little bit better. So we're not looking to make people better. I wish we could. We can't, but we need to make them a little bit better than they have been. So you have this program improvement. Reverse also is true. If you feel yourself doing less to protect yourself against the fatigue, then you'll be able to do less, and it gets worse. I always tell people the old joke about the two guys walking across the plains in Africa, and this lion starts chasing them. I don't know what they were doing walking across the plains in Africa, but they were. And this lion starts chasing them, and they start running away, and the lion is catching on them. I literally tell people this in the clinic. The lion starts catching them, at which point one of them stops, gets his rucksack off, takes his shoes off, and puts a pair of running shoes on. And the other guy goes to him, "What's the point of doing that? You know, the lion's still going to catch it." And he goes, "I don't have to run faster than the lion. I just have to run faster than you." The point is, you have to make tomorrow faster than today. Okay, you don't have to make it go away. You just have to make it a little bit better, and that will then naturally improve. To jump to the end of all of this, that's why we don't ask people to say, "How are you next week?" We get people to fix on Christmas or their birthday or their summer holiday and say, "I want you and your summer holiday next year to really feel better by that point. Have a landmark against which you compare it." So the second stage is to treat those things which are part of it. The third is critically important, and this is coping strategies. What can you do to help yourself to live better? And that's the meat of this. The first two are what doctors can do for you, and this is largely what you can do for yourself. Front and center is exercise. As Collette said, you cannot hurt yourself with exercise, but you can make yourself better because you fine-tune everything. We know that acid builds up in your muscles. You know, one of the reasons you feel like you've run a half marathon after doing a little bit of exercise is acid builds up in your muscles. It can't get away because the blood flow, because of the autonomic dysfunction. How do athletes make sure that they have less acid in their muscle? They train. And so this is the whole point about exercise. Now, people really worry about, you know, does this mean putting the Lycra on and going to the gym and all of that? And the answer is it isn't. It's, as Collette said, movement as medicine. It's about walking a little bit further. It's about getting off the bus a stop earlier. It's about taking the long way around and walk. And, you know, if I've not done enough a day, you know, I have to drive home because I live, you know, away out of town. I walk the long way around the car park. You know, it's as simple as that. And so build exercise into your life. And there's actually trial evidence from a number of places that exercise actually improves fatigue. And we did a small study a number of years ago, and Palak and colleagues in Birmingham have just done a bigger study, and the data look really impressive. You will start it and you'll think, how can I do this? I'm tired. You'll find it a bit of a struggle. And that's why we need to have people to help with it. But it really, really works. The other things to do are to do with timing. So we know that fatigue gets worse during the day in PBC. It's one of its characteristics. So plan your day. So if you've got important things doing them in the morning, and accept, you know, you may well need to have a lie down in the afternoon. That's fine. So plan your day. If you work night shifts, try and stop doing that because that's catastrophic. with sleep and with fatigue. So just planning with your day. I've made enormous difference for people by working with their employer to recognize this and just work in the mornings. And it's as simple as that. So that's really, really important. Also realizing that if you have a bad day today, it will be better tomorrow, roll with it and just kind of realize that there will be ebbs and flows. But the most important thing is what I call owning the disease. Okay. You have to own this. Okay. I can help. I really do care about this, but ultimately it's you and your life. And so you must own the problem and own the solution. Don't blame me. I'm doing what I can to develop therapies, but when next weekend, it's for you to do something about it. And that can come across as a bit harsh, but it isn't. It's it's designed to be empowering. And of course, the best way of owning it is exercise, and another thing I always say to people, like, I'm to exercise for years. Well, as Mao Zedong said, even a journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. And you just need 9,999 more. Okay, these sayings trip out because I say these all the time to people to humanize it. So own it. Okay, and decide that today is the day you're going to make it all better. It's in your hands. There are plenty of people to help. So just decide you're going to do it and off you go.
I would like to add something here.
Yeah,
when David first spoke to me about exercise, I'd heard it years before from Canada and thought it was nonsense. And David invited me down to the labs in Newcastle and I met Professor Trinell. And I actually saw, I was sitting in the chair, the oxygen on, all the rest of it. And I went back 6 months later on a program. And I actually saw in black and white the difference in the numbers and everything else and how I felt. I had to be convinced. And once convinced, I needed to share it. But what is really important to get across to people is that you can make a difference. What I got from last week with the FDA was people's despair and the fact they didn't know, didn't understand, or didn't believe that they were that they had power in their hands. And that was what I find distressing. So please believe me, I'm happy to talk to MD on the phone. I've got bands, one big band you can buy on Amazon. I'm going to York for a few days. I'll take the band with me, do a bit of rowing, do a bit of something, tie it on the end of a door handle, get things going. Apps, look on Google. They'll show you how to do simple things, but please believe me, you do have the power. I would like to, David, I think everybody's here in the room. It would be maybe you and I should do a special on this. We'll do that. So David will give you the medical physiological point of view, and I can give you some of the practical things, and from some of the people in our organization who couldn't do anything. So I think that's something, David, we'll work on.
So Mike Trinell, who Collette talked about, he once told me he did two things. One is there's a great bit of film that he shows, which is that Newcastle University, where I'm based, has a campus in Malaysia. And so we all flew out there to do some lecturing and flew through Singapore airport. And his film is him walking along in the airport terminal and all the other university people on the moving carpet. Okay. And it's a lovely bit of film to make a point. And since that day, in every time, well, I don't go through airports anymore because of COVID, but before all of that, I used to always walk in airports, not go on the moving carpet because of that. Okay. So that's what he's on about. And I also asked him when, people struggle with this idea of what's exercise. And he said, it's simple. It's 10% more than you do now. Okay. If you do 10% more this week than you did last week, and then the week after you do 10% more than that. So you don't need to be, running the 100 meters in 11 seconds. What you need to do is to just build it up slowly. And I think that's the really important message, is that your body adapts to what you do. And if you do more than that, then it will change the sort of physiology, if you like.
I would also go on to say, when you've got PBC, you'll have heard your patients say this, I'll do it in a minute, I'm mustering myself up. There's a great book written by an American lady, Mel. It's on Audible books. I listen to Audible books, out walking, earphones, happy days. You don't know how much you've walked. It's great. And it's called the 5-second rule. And what she does is 5,
Have
4,
you
3, 2,
found
1,
any-
go.
Have you found any informative books that you might wish were on Audible, Collette?
All right, okay. I know what. Is it on Audible?
No, it isn't actually. No, it isn't.
Gotcha. Read
but
this
I'm-
book. It's by Mel someday. It's the 5-second rule. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Do it. And I tell you, it works for me. It's become a way of life. Do it now. You'll love yourself on the move for it. Right, we've done fatigue. David, you and I'll do some backstreet. Behind the scenes chatting.
And then just the last, the E is empathize. And this is, we use this to train doctors, and nurses.
Yeah.
And the E is empathize. And what that means is try and understand and try and appreciate. Don't sympathize. Nobody on this call wants me to feel sorry for them, but they want me to try and get it as much as I can. So empathy is really important. It's good old-fashioned doctoring. It's to say, this is horrible. Every time I talk to somebody with PBC, I realize how horrible it is, and that motivates me to try and do better to help it. And we can help you to help yourself, but you need to help yourself. So I think that's very important. We don't want people to feel sorry. And when we do training materials, for doctors and nurses, the last sentence is don't fail before you start. And by that, we mean if you sit there as a doctor and roll your eyes and tut and say, well, I only manage proper disease, or do you know I was on call last night, so you can talk to me about being tired. At that point, you have lost it completely, because that person will not talk to you about their things. And doctors, there are certain doctors, we know who they are, who believe that their patients never get fatigue, and probably their patients never talk about fatigue with them because they've realized all they do is get mocked.
Yeah, there's no point.
We as professionals need, and nobody in the world is helped by their doctor telling them that they've got that symptom worse than them. That is just not helpful.
I know. I'm tired as well. Yeah.
So that's for us to do. So it's a structured approach in that order, and actually, but just remember the C are coping strategies, which are things that you can do to help make it better and own the problem. And that's what makes a real difference.
And believe that you can. Believe it. Because I've got loads of testimonies that can validate what we're saying.
Yes,
okay, absolutely. I'm going to move on. Thank you, David. That's invaluable.
Does that count as a short answer?
On your big
When Robert used to do this, he used to have this thing about short answers, but Collette is much more forgiving.
Right. I tested positive for COVID on 27th of January. I reported it. I went into isolation as instructed, and they've now been released after 10 days, so to speak. Still testing positive after 12 days. I'm quite well and only suffering from dry eyes and mouth that seems to partner PBC. Okay. I've had PBC 13 years. I wonder if my immune system is weaker and is taking longer to clear the virus. Now, lots of people have positive tests way after the day, don't they?
Yeah. So in general, PBC patients have a stronger immune system, not a weaker one. So actually, on average, PBC patients get fewer in the way of viruses and fewer in the way of kind of those sort of niggling things. So it tends to be the other way, rather than it. And as what I've said several times before, actually, with the exception of people on immunosuppressant treatments after transplant, or because they've got overlap, or people with cirrhosis, and those are small percentages of people, PBC patients actually do better than the average population with COVID. So, and I think that's because you have good effect. So what Collette's alluding to is that the bits and pieces of the virus detected in different ways hang around for a long time after the live virus has gone. And so there is a long tail for the tests. And I think when the dust settles and when the party poppers and champagne are taken away from number 10, when this all settles down, we're going to look back and we'll think testing was part of the problem here.
I think that's very fair indeed.
And I'll be bold here, and I'm a clinician working in the NHS and things like that. There are a lot of knock-on effects from COVID, but as an active problem, COVID is largely gone now. We are largely mopping up after the issues, but what Omicron appears to have done is acted as a natural vaccine, actually.
Yeah, a virologist friend of mine, she actually said to me on the 19th of December, having seen it under the microscope, She said, this is their road out. This is it. But somebody might want to tell Holyrood I never said that. Okay, so Northern Greece, lady has PBC AIH. Do you know of any speciality centres in Northern Greece? Do you know any Greek hepatologists we can put this person in touch with?
Oh, yes, there's a really good George. So yes, there is, and I think there's actually somebody I know moderately well in Greece, and I can find out his name.
Well, I'll leave that with you to pass. Get Miriam to pass it.
I think it's Thessaloniki. I think it's Thessaloniki. I think it is, but
you want me to spell that on my notes?
Yeah. So yes, there is, and he's very, very good and very aware of PBC, and is.
What hospital would you be in? Do you know?
I don't.
Right.
I can dig that out for you.
Right. Great. Thank you. Okay. So sorry. I had a private fibro scan. Blood levels were all very high. Professor said 11.5 severe fibrosis, highly likely PBC. NHS appointment in November, MRI scan, fibrosis scan, and started on Urso. MRI showed liver was smooth, fibro scan up to 15.2, no MA found in the blood. Symptoms, dry eyes, dry mouth, itching, tiredness, and elevated LFT. Can I have PBC with all these symptoms, even though tested negative with the AMA?
A lot of the features of PBC. So one of the things I always say to people is that the characteristic features of liver disease are that the features are not characteristic. Okay. By that I mean that if somebody's having a heart attack, then the way in which they describe their symptoms tells me they're having a heart attack, because it's a very characteristic pattern of problems. Whereas with PBC, what you have are features, all of which can occur in lots of other settings. And that's why it gets missed by people. So fatigue obviously can be a feature of many different things. Although, for those of us who kind of talk about it a lot with people, there are certain characteristics that tend to come out, like they're getting worse during the course of the day. The itch is usually to us very characteristic because it tends to be under the skin, feels a bit like creepy crawlies. People often do that. Whereas if it's eczema, they do that. I always teach the fellows the way people use their hand movements. Gives the name. So there are certain subtle things that suggest it, but in truth, itch is common, fatigue is common, and of course, abnormal liver blood tests are common. So there is nothing characteristic about PBC unless you're really tuned into it. So the bedrock of diagnosis is the AMA. Also, there is a particular type of anti-nuclear antibody that is characteristic of PBC. So most people have the AMA or anti-mitochondrial antibody, but some people have a version of anti-nuclear antibody or ANA. Now, this is where it gets a bit complicated because ANA can be seen in lots of other diseases, including autoimmune hepatitis, which causes fatigue, liver function test abnormality, etc. But the pattern is very different. So the first thing we always ask if people are AMA negative is, are they ANA positive? If they are, then that's the equivalent of, and it's the right pattern, that's the equivalent of AMA for the diagnosis of PBC. So that's a common catch. There are about 2 to 3% of PBC patients have neither of those antibodies. Okay, you don't need to have the antibody. The antibodies don't cause the disease, so they're just a marker of it. So you don't need to have the antibody to have the diagnosis. And it's about 2 to 3%. So but remember, there are about 16,000 patients in the UK, so you can do the maths. 2 to 3% of 16,000 is a reasonable number of people. So we do see those problems. But you can only diagnose PBC in that setting with a liver biopsy because you have to have 2 out of the 3 of one of the antibodies, liver blood test abnormality or a biopsy finding. And if the blood tests are abnormal, the antibodies are negative, you can't get 2 without a biopsy. So you can't diagnose antibody negative PBC without a biopsy. There are lots of people who are antibody negative because they don't have PBC, they have something else, and people have kind of in a sense, talked themselves into it, or the clinicians have gone down a particular path. The one to always watch out for, the big trap for AMA negative people who look, sound and feel like they've got PBC, of course, is PSC, primary sclerosing cholangitis, which is a first cousin of PBC. So most people I see who are, quotes, AMA negative PBC actually have PSC rather than PBC. Now, aspects of its treatment are the same. So we still use urso quite widely. People still get itch. You manage it the same way. However, there are some aspects to it that are quite distinct, and so it is important to understand the difference. Ultimately, as we always say on these calls, we don't biopsy people with barn door PBC. However, without barn door PBC, that's where biopsy can sometimes be useful, and it does make a difference. We are in a world of increasingly effective treatments, but they are lasered in much more. They're much more focused on particular diseases, and so it's going to be increasingly important to be certain what you're dealing with. If you're certain somebody's got PBC, you're absolutely certain. Okay, that's easy. But if you're not certain, then if you treat as if it's PBC and it's something else, you maybe miss an opportunity to treat it otherwise. The other comment I would just say with those numbers for the FibroScan, and there are lots of caveats with FibroScan about different people doing them and different days of the week and so on and so forth. But if those numbers are representative, then that's changing moderately quickly. So in that situation, it's very difficult to be certain, not knowing individuals. But in that situation, not sure about the diagnosis, you've got to change the FibroScan over a relatively short period of time, liver biopsy.
Yeah, okay. Thank you, David.
That would earn enough points for liver biopsy, so I would know what we were dealing with.
Absolutely.
Well, I would explain all of that to you as a patient, and it would be something we would agree on. So, I would explain why. My rule of thumb for liver biopsy is that it has to answer a question I can't answer in any other way, and it has to plausibly lead to a treatment that I wouldn't have given otherwise.
Yeah, 100%. Okay, I've been diagnosed for 18 months, severe fatigue, itching, osteoporosis, high cholesterol. I've had fibrosis. I had fibrosis when diagnosed. The FibroScan showed fibrosis stage 2. 1 year later, advanced fibrosis stage 3. I'm taking 1,000 milligrams of urso per day. AMA is 2560, which is not really that relevant, isn't it? ANA 512, liver values are currently good. I don't smoke or drink alcohol, and I eat healthy. So a few questions. What can I do to counteract the fibrosis in my liver? Do I need any other medication? Is the worsening of fibrosis very fast? Well, everybody's different. What is the solution? So we really, the fibrosis, what can I do to counteract the fibrosis in the liver?
Okay, so what you've got there, and just remind me, the liver biochemistry was pretty normal on
that's what they said. They're taking urso, liver values are currently good. So it's not really detailed. I don't know what currently good means.
Okay. And fatigue is a problem.
Yeah, fatigue and itching is a problem. High cholesterol, osteoporosis.
Okay, so in that situation, you've got a few kind of things which are floating around and which need to be tidied up. So I like to see people with stable blood tests with a low FibroScan and no symptoms, and we then chat about the state of football in Newcastle and their grandchildren, and those are nice clinics, and we keep it all under control, and we cover all of the bases, and we don't like. One of the big things I say to people in my clinic is we don't like surprises. We don't do surprises. We anticipate, we predict, we intervene. So we don't like uncertainty. We have to nail it down. For those of you who, I don't know if any people on this call were on the FDA call last week, I thought it was useful, but for me, there was too much focus on liver transplantation. Everything we do in our clinical service in the UK hepatology is to stop people needing a transplant. Okay, that's our goal. I'm a liver transplant consultant as well as a PBC person, and so I'm not anti-transplant, and transplant is life-saving in the right situation. But nobody with PBC ever needs to have a transplant. You should be able to stop that from happening. And that's what we need to focus on doing. So actually, we shouldn't be looking at ways to have more transplants. We should be looking at ways to have fewer transplants. So controlling it all to stabilize everything is what you want to do. Where, in terms of progressing fibrosis, the first thing I would say with that is there is a health warning with FibroScan to do with who does it. And it gives you a very exact number, okay? A very exact number, 15.1 or something like that. And that makes it feel like an exact measurement. However, you can have the same person have a FibroScan later the same day and it'd be 13.5. That also feels like a very exact number, but it's a very different exact number. So there can be a sense of exactness to this, which is a little bit more than it really is. So the first thing to say is, when in doubt, repeat FibroScans, because it can fluctuate a little bit to do with observer error. So it's a really useful technology, but it's not an infallible technology. It never gives you the answer. It gives you part of the picture for us. So we only ever use it as part of the picture. So if that's at face value, however, and that's going up, I would think we would like to do something more, because we are not stabilizing this, okay? So what are the something mores? Well, I think it's very clear cut now that that both obeticholic acid and bezafibrate are anti-fibrotic, and they stop fibrosis progression and they allow fibrosis to retreat. So I would be in those situations looking to give an additional therapy aimed at that. And I would go, so those are anti-fibrotic drugs in a way that urso isn't, okay? So in that situation, given what you've said, I would want to be looking for an additional therapy, okay? In an ideal world, only one of those therapies really works for fatigue, we think, and that's obeticholic acid, or at least it's under investigation in trials for that. So I'd be looking to use obeticholic acid if at all possible. And what we've just described there is actually our OAKS trial, which is where there is brain fog fatigue in people who don't meet the criteria for obeticholic acid on their biochemistry. So all things being equal, I would look to do that. Now, if people didn't want to go into a trial or whatever, and the biochemistry meant that, you know, kind of NHS rules didn't allow you to have obeticholic acid, I would certainly try fibrate in that situation. And fibrate will be better for the itch than obeticholic acid would be. There are a number of new drugs coming along in PBC, so it goes in ebbs and flows, but we are at the beginning of another golden age of new treatment options, and these are treatments which are different. They do something different to what we're doing already. So we went through a bit of a time of revolution with obeticholic acid, and then we went through a phase of lots of drugs that looked a bit like obeticholic acid, and that, you know, we had lots of drugs that seemed to be effective, didn't add anything to what we had already. And now what we've gone into brand new therapies which do new things. And there is a drug called setanaxib, and I can feel a bare facts coming on of what's coming down the line in PBC. I've talked myself into it, you know, before.
I know, absolutely. You're so good at it.
Talk myself into it. A drug called setanaxib, okay? Setanaxib has no real effect on the biochemistry, but it dramatically improves FibroScan in the trials done to date, and it also improves fatigue. So that is a trial that's going to open in the UK fairly shortly, all right? So that's the sort of thing that I think becomes a very interesting option. And just to whet people's appetite, conversation I had last week with some people from America with brains the size of planets. They are looking at a combination of something that absolutely switches off the specific immune response in PBC. They wanted to know how to use it. And I said, give people obeticholic acid for 3 months, then give this to cure the immunity, and that will cure PBC. And they said, you're on, we really fancy that. So that one will hopefully be coming down the line at some point. So lots of exciting things. So I would try and get obeticholic acid, if not bezafibrate, and I would keep an eye out for the setanaxib trial, because that's probably the drug that has the most perfect profile of actions. I mean, all these things need to be trialed further, but it looks exciting.
Right, I'm going to press on. We've got loads of questions. Something similar, the next one, their father had PBC. She's been told she's progressed to cirrhosis for her last 2 fibre scans, non-responded to URSO and taking 10 milligrams of OCA. Now, I don't know if this person's taking URSO still or not. If you're not, you should be. Is there anything I can do lifestyle-wise to slow progression?
So I think lifestyle-wise, it's very difficult. So I couldn't genuinely say that there's anything that's been shown to have an effect because of diet. That there isn't no clear association between diet and risk of progression in PBC. I do think you'll hear us talk a lot about oxidant stress. So in your liver, you get an oxidant, when bilirubin is there and acting, what it does is create its own inflammation environment. So many people will have heard the term antioxidants. Well, that's oxidant stress creates an environment that worsens disease. The one thing that we absolutely know improves oxidant stress is, at risk of sounding like a stuck record, exercise. Okay. So exercise is antioxidant because it makes you utilize, because basically you utilize energy in a more efficient way. So you do it what's called aerobically as opposed to anaerobically. So you have less stress from that. So I think the main thing, diet less so, but the main thing I think that people can do to really do everything they can to slow progression is a good exercise program.
And there's a comment here on the screen. I eat a lot of dry fruit with muesli. It's okay. Dry fruit's full of sugar. Sugar makes you tired. Sugar, to me, is a non-medic. It's one of the most poisonous things on this planet.
Well, you've been
so I would
talking
say
about
to everybody out there, give up sugar and you might find a change in energy levels. But
my wife wears T-shirts which says "Eat real food" on them. So she's a low carb person. She's an anaesthetist who tells people to eat low carbs. So exercise and low carb is probably what I would do in that situation, reduce oxidant stress. I think if people's disease is still progressing despite OCA, where we are now going pretty uniformly is towards triple therapy. And in those situations, I would add bezafibrate. So I wouldn't swap OCA for bezafibrate. I would add in bezafibrate.
Okay.
And I think there's some data now emerging, certainly our experience, and the Belgians have got some, Frederick Nevins has got some very nice data. It really does look like it synergizes. So I think what we're doing, I mean, there is a trial of triple therapy going on at the moment, but I think they'll struggle to recruit because frankly, we do it already. So what we're doing, so I think we've treated about 10 people with triple therapy, and I have to say, touch wood, it seems to augment the effect of obeticholic acid.
Okay. Does PBC affect ferritin levels? Because this person has dropped to 12. I don't know what ferritin is.
Ferritin, I was going to make a joke about ferrets wearing tin hats, but I won't.
Well, we've got time. We're on the clock.
I know. You don't pay me by the hour, I can tell you that.
I couldn't afford it.
Okay, so ferritin is an iron storage protein. Okay, so it's how your body stores iron. So when you take iron up out of the diet, it gets converted.
You've switched off, David. Where have you gone? You're frozen. You'll come back. For those, sorry about this, people, but sometimes this happens at the university where he is, and he has to log out and come back in again. Hello from Belgium. Hello there. Jane saying, trying to drink coffee without sugar and struggling. Is there anything else? Well, there's Canderel and there's sugar substitutes. But hey, I mean, don't make yourself miserable. Try the sugar substitutes. I used to drink sugar in my coffee, and I just take it black now, and I quite like it. Your taste, if you stop taking sugar, after a while, you find it quite unpleasant. So don't give up, Jane. Don't give up. Jane used to drink something called with fat coke, but I haven't drunk since, right? If I had So you have this bit medication made it worse. Well, they say that we can, drink the normal amount of units on a weekly basis. I don't know how often you've done that. If I'd say, if medication made it worse, I wouldn't have thought 3 at all. But that's something that the doctor wouldn't be able to say to you either. But normally we're told that, was it 7 for women, 14 for men, or 14 for women, and 21. But unless you've got cirrhosis and you are unwell, and if it makes you feel unwell, then obviously don't do it. So your phosphate level 205 in February, and now it's 122 in October. How quickly can this turn into cirrhosis? If your phosphate level 205 in February, are you back, David?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. I can see you. Can you hear and see me?
Yes.
Right.
Yeah, sorry about this.
I've just answered one or two. One on alcohol.
Okay.
Right.
So ferritin is an iron storage protein, and it is a marker of how much iron there is in your body. So a low ferritin means that somebody is iron deficient, and it's a much better way of measuring iron than actually measuring iron is. So a blood test for iron itself is a bit inaccurate for various chemical reasons. So we tend to measure ferritin. So ferritin that's low is not normally associated with PBC because it's associated with iron deficiency anemia. The only connection would be through something like celiac disease. Okay, so in celiac disease, which is associated with PBC, people don't absorb iron effectively, and so you can be iron deficient. So it's one of those things I'd be a little bit cautious putting that down to PBC, but you do need to work out why the ferritin is low. And in the real world, it can be a sign of blood loss somewhere, and that obviously needs to be thought about and investigated. So the only connection with PBC is through celiac disease.
I had, it was familiar, and I realised my niece has hemochromatosis.
Right, okay.
And she mentioned, so that for everybody, that's too much iron in the blood, and she gets they let her blood every so often.
Exactly. So somebody with hemochromatosis would have a ferritin of 10,000 or something when they start. If you think of somebody with low, it's 10. So that's because they've absorbed too much iron from their diet, or possibly drinking too much iron brew.
Right, I have a mystery non-blanching PETECHIAL rash the GP can't fathom. The only thing that eases it is Ferritin. Could it be sudden onset of PBCH, or was it worth asking to try on cholestyramine?
So it doesn't sound like it to me. So the only rashes you get in PBC are the ones that are caused by scratching. So if people haven't scratched and injured the skin, the itching is always not associated with a skin change. So we do see now skins are not my area, and it's one of the aspects of medical school that I tended to play golf through. So it's not my area at all, but there are some conditions that can associate with PBC, like lichen planus, like cutaneous lupus, but that really needs a dermatologist to have a quick look at it. And one of the things that a lot of dermatology clinics are offering now is actually, it's a thing that's come out from COVID, is people taking a photograph of a skin lesion, and then there's a quick referral via an electronic, a quick look at it, and that they get a first view of it all. So that might be available locally. So my gut feeling is could be one of the things that's associated with PBC, not PBC.
Okay. I have PBC EIH, now takes 75 milligrams azathioprine and 1,000 of urso. LFTs remain normal, and the ALP was between 60 and 80. In the last year, the ALP has gradually increased to 93.97 and now 104. Should it be concerned in view of previous levels, and can there be is there a reason for the increase other than PBC?
No, it's all in the normal range. So don't worry about the values of alkaline phosphatase within the normal range. They have no significance. So you still have normal liver blood tests.
Great. Right, I'm going to the screen. So Jane's saying phosphate level 205 in February last year, and now 122. in October, how quickly can this turn into cirrhosis? Well, that's actually quite low as well, isn't it?
So what was the level of?
Phosphatase was 205 in 2021. I'm not sure I understand this, Jane. It is now 122 in October. That's it down. That's what you want.
Yes. Yes.
Yes. So yeah.
Yes. So alkaline phosphatase is the marker we use to understand how effective treatment is.
Yeah.
Lower is better. The lower, the better. Yeah. Normal is below 130. We're looking for below about 200 on treatment as a sign that the treatment is likely to be being effective. Above 200 is where you would think of additional therapies. But once it's below 130, then, you know, pop a cork.
Okay. Now, Jean's come back. Now, I'm going to comment on this before I hand over. I totally agree with your advice on the fatigue. What can I do about the fact I have other autoimmune conditions? Exercise hard to do with vestibular neuritis is one of them, vascular eczema in the legs another. Do you have advice for me? Oh, yes. I'm becoming very depressed at all the pain and falls. Just carry on, right? Okay. Doctor saves lives. Physiotherapists make it worthwhile. So
you must have been told that by a physio.
I was.
That doesn't surprise me.
Who's married to a doctor? Now, I love pharmacists and physiotherapists. Physiotherapists, and I worked for the Tribunal Service for 12 years, and I heard so many times that it doesn't work, it made me worse. Now, David will have a comment to make, I'm sure, but I absolutely advise you, Jean, to talk to and have a session and have a program made for you by a physiotherapist, which we have on tap in this country. They are amazing. They can have you do an exercise sitting in a chair. So I would strongly recommend that you do see a physiotherapist. Do you want to comment, David, further?
Yes. So, you know, there are people who can't do lower limb exercise. So I managed to fall off a mountain bike in the summer. Thank you to my children for that one. And they had an implausible sense of how well I could cycle down a mountain on a mountain bike. And I couldn't exercise my lower limb because of cruciate ligament damage. So I was at the gym and they have a hand bike machine. And I got into doing the hand bike and I still do it. And actually that sitting down exercise, which has all of the effects. And I actually think in terms of physical health, for me, that's actually been better than, you know, leg-based exercise. So, so a gym, exercise instructors or a physio, there are plenty of things that you can do lying down or sitting down. And it's exactly what they're there to do. You know, simple exercises in a way, you know, you can get that advice from, you know, apps and things like that about, you know, standard and simple things. But when it gets a little bit more complicated than this is where a bespoke, is where a bespoke kind of, you know, input is. And when I, you know, did my cruciate ligament, I just went to see a local physio. It cost me about 30 quid. And it was fantastic. He gave me some exercises, sorted it all out, and it's priceless. And you can try and get that sort of stuff on the NHS, but it's one of the things that doesn't particularly work. And actually, it is really easy to get really good input from physios.
Yeah. So you've made quite a few comments. I see you have quite a few conditions, Jean, which I'm really, really sorry to read. But look, give it a wee bash with the physio and let's see if you can manage something. And the physios can send you to swimming pools these days and do all sorts of things. Not that I don't know anything about your conditions, but give it a wee go and let us know how you get on. David, I've got a whole load of questions. Are you okay for time if I get to some? Okay, right. Please explain why a raised GGT test with positive AMA is just as important as having AMA with raised ALP for diagnosis. I don't know that it is that important, but we need to keep this short.
Run that past me again, sorry.
Okay, please explain why a raised GGT test with positive AMA is just as important as having a positive AMA with ALP for diagnosis.
Yeah.
A raised GGT, of course, could mean that you're a wee bit overweight. It could mean a number of things.
Yeah, so GGT is the other thing that's released by damaged bile ducts. Okay, so if it's from the liver, then if it's a PBC cause for it, it's just the same as alkaline phosphatase. The problem is, that Collette alluded to, it can be raised by other things. Alkaline phosphatase can, for example, Paget's disease or a fracture will do it. So what you do with all of these things, is see the whole picture, okay? So you never make a diagnosis on a single test. So if I had somebody who was AMA positive and a raised gamma GGT, I would ask, how high is it? Okay, so you can get a little bit of noise, around the normal values. But if it's way up, it's way up. That's a good sign it's PBC. If somebody had PBC symptoms, then we have a saying that if it walks like a duck, has feathers and quacks, it's probably a duck. And so if people got symptoms with all of that, then we would tend to go with it. So as far as I'm concerned, a raised gamma GT in somebody with an AMA is PBC, unless I've got reason to believe confidently it's something else. So it's as other countries do it all the time, the UK tends not to. It is, however, quite a useful test. And for me, it normally means the same thing, but it will go a bit more up and down.
Yeah. Okay. Mine dropped like a stone, my GGT, when I lost weight.
And the other one is that a lot of doctors assume that raised gamma GGT is caused by drinking alcohol. And it is.
No, I've just made the point then, haven't I? Losing weight.
It's an urban myth, and it's wrong.
Okay.
It's caused by a variety of things, but PBC is one of them.
Okay. I currently have problems with my lymph nodes in my neck, painful and overactive. They can't figure out what's wrong. However, my parathyroid is low. Could that be causing the problems? They've checked me for Sjogren's, but say I don't have it, but do have symptoms. And just to say before you answer, many people are told they don't have Sjogren's and they do have the symptoms. It doesn't matter. You treat the symptoms. If it's your eyes and your mouth, been through this, you know what to do. The eye drops and keeping saliva in your mouth. Even though the test shows no, treat the symptoms. It's really important. But this lady's lymph nodes in her neck, they're painful and overactive. They can't figure out what's wrong, David.
Okay.
I'm saying lady, it could be a gent.
Right. So this is kind of general comments, because it's the sort of thing where it's very difficult to be specific without feeling them, to be honest, and seeing them. So in general, and this is, please note, in general, painful lymph nodes tend to be caused by infection or inflammation nearby, okay? Because that's how they work. Things drain out through the lymph nodes. So that usually is a sign you've got an infection somewhere above the lymph nodes, right? In somebody with PBC with painful lymph nodes, then it's likely to be a mouth infection of some sort, which is likely to be with a form of Sjogren's, because that's a really common pattern where, because saliva's there to clean your mouth, keep your mouth clean, because you don't produce the saliva, you can get gum infections and tooth infections, and the immune system drains through the lymph nodes, and that would tend to be the thing. The really important question is whether they're swollen or not. Painful and swollen don't necessarily go together. Big lymph nodes obviously have a different set of potential causes. And so it needs to be looked at in a different way. The thing to always remember, though, with lymph nodes is that one of the things you've got to be aware of is things like lymphoma. And I don't say that to scare people, but there are only 3 things that cause you to have itch, which are not to do with being a skin condition, okay? So we call them systemic causes of itch. So if you've got that itch, it's not caused by a rash. PBC is one of them, renal failure is another one, and lymphoma is the third. And I lectured some medical students a few years ago, and I told them that fact. If you don't remember anything of what I say, remember this, because you'll save somebody's life in the future, is that if somebody's itching and their skin's normal, it's one of those 3 things. And several years later, I got a very nice note from a student to say, thank you for saving my life, because I was itching and I didn't have a rash, and I got it checked out and I had lymphoma and it was treatable. Okay. So where somebody's got painful nodes, there's no quite thing. It is one of the things that needs to be checked out. Mostly it will be Sjogren's in those situations 99 times out of 100, but 1 time out of 100 it won't be. And I would have a pretty good guess if I could see you and could feel those nodes without that, safety first says that's something that just sends a little bit of a red flag for me.
Okay.
It's not PBC itself. PBC itself can't cause inflammation in the lymph nodes in the neck because there isn't a pathway for drainage like that. So painful lymph nodes tend to be okay, caused by infection. It's big lymph nodes we tend to worry about, but remember, my student.
Okay. Okay. I overheat at night so badly, my whole inside is burning. That sounds awful. I can't explain the feeling I have to go out, but I have to go outside to cool down. Any ideas why this happens? Please think.
It could be itch, okay, which sounds weird because somebody who's not got itch be told they've got itch. Remember, PBC itch actually isn't itch. It is a sensation to do with cutaneous stimulation, okay? Your brain often, so your brain gets a whole load of signals from receptors in your skin, okay? And it tries to interpret it, okay? So itch, remember, is an exaggeration of the sensation of insects on your skin, because an insect, you've evolved to sense insects on your skin, so you swap them away so that they don't, bite you and give you an infectious disease. That's what itch is, okay? So pain is a sensation to make you take your hand away from being burnt or something like that. So the brain has a kind of fixed sense of what these things are, and it interprets it in the light of the signals that it gets, and those signals sometimes can be scrambled. So sometimes PBC patients tell us that my itch it's a painful itch. It's actually like pain, and that's because these signals are getting a little bit scrambled. Now, hot and cold in the skin are also the sorts of signals that can get scrambled. So the question I would ask in that situation is, do you get skin color change with it? So if you get skin color change with it, then it's something to do with the skin. If you don't get skin color change with it, my best guess is that it is a variant of itch. And actually in those situations, I would try an itch therapy. Okay?
Okay, great. Poor thing. I get little bruises, especially on my arms. Is this anything to do with PBC?
Yeah, you can get so bruising is part of the PBC spectrum. You get some vulnerability in the blood vessels, and so you just get little bleeds underneath the skin, and it doesn't mean anything, but yes, it's quite common in people.
Okay, we're nearly there. I've been getting heart palpitations coming and going. A bit of a mild cough comes and goes. Could this be Sjogren's?
So palpitations, Julia, we're talking a lot about all of this today, but Julia used to tell me that palpitations can be part of the whole autonomic dysfunction thing, okay? And what happens is when you stand up, anyway, your blood pressure instantly drops, okay? Because blood pools. Now, if that continues, you'll black out. When you black out, that's bad for you. And so your body tries to correct this. So what it does is it has sensors in the veins in the neck, okay? Where it's sent, or the arteries in your neck, it senses your blood pressure falling, okay? That sends a signal to your brain. That signal from your brain goes to your muscles, tells the muscles to contract the vessels in order to force blood back to your heart so you don't black out. All that happens instantaneously. It's a bit like a fighter pilot with a G suit where the legs inflate to squeeze the blood back. That happens every time you stand up and you never know it's happening. And what we do with some conditions is lose that sensitivity. So PBC patients lose baroreceptor sensitivity. So Julia and I published a ton of stuff on this, and it's part of this blood pressure fall. It's all about that signaling thing. Now, if you stand up, your blood pressure falls instantaneously, and the signal to go to your legs doesn't go out, your blood pressure continues to fall. And so your body kind of presses the metaphorical big red button for your fail-safe thing, and that is to pump out adrenaline that makes your heart beat fast, okay? Now, heart beating fast is not a good way to keep your blood pressure up because it's an unpleasant sensation, but it will work temporarily. So Julia always taught me that palpitations are part of a feature of this. So the commonest reason to get palpitations with PBC or a fast heart rate is is as part of all of that. So just be aware of that. And if it's somebody who's got a little bit of dizziness when they stand up, or this happens when they stand up, we can also get some flushing with it. So facial flushing with that is part of this, fight or flight. People sometimes feel panicky. It's an unpleasant sensation. So it can be part of all of that, not Sjögren's, but part of all of this. Now, the massive caveat is that, of course, there are 101 things that can cause you to have palpitations to do with heart disease. And so if you're getting palpitations, somebody needs to do an ECG and take your pulse just to make sure. I used to have palpitations every so often. I, being a man and a doctor, obviously ignored them. And it turned out I had a heart condition called Wolff-Parkinson-White syndrome, and I needed 3 operations for it. And I'd managed to convince myself it was something else. So there are important heart causes. It's very difficult to decipher it without an ECG.
And also a bit acid as well. I mean, that's, people with PBC, we do have the Gaviscon. A wee bit acid can cause the same thing. The mild cough, she said, it comes and goes. This is something new and it's not been checked out. Don't assume it's Sjögren's. Any new symptom, get it checked out.
A cough is nothing to do with PBC, okay? So not that. And not Sjögren's for me. I mean, what it is, it's difficult to know. The palpitations could be. It needs an ECG.
Further investigation. Last question. I'm a non-responder to all PBC medication with cirrhosis. I'm waiting to do a trial as only option open to me. If the new drug helps with my high blood, would this help with cirrhosis?
Okay, so by don't respond to any PBC therapy, I'm assuming that's urso, obeticholic acid, and bezafibrate. Okay, so we'll assume it's that. So if I had somebody like that, I would first off want to recalibrate what's going on. So I would take a step back and say, how certain am I that this is PBC? Okay, and also, is there anything else going on? So is this PBC plus something else? Okay, so that's the first thing that I would do, is take a step back. I would look through the tests. If a liver biopsy has been done, I would look at the liver biopsy and I would just ask the question, have we been treating the wrong thing? Okay, it happens. And so therefore I'd want to do that. Okay, the second thing I would ask is, if steroids haven't been used, are we missing overlap here, which won't respond to those other therapies? So could this be a missed overlap syndrome? And you look pretty stupid if you have missed overlap and as a doctor and haven't tried steroids with it. And I can tell you, there have been people who I haven't for the world thought have had overlap in exactly this situation. I've tried them with steroids and they've got better. So, even wise old fools like me can get it wrong. Both of those things kind of suggest a biopsy might be useful. So I'm not going to sit here and say biopsy, but there are certain situations in which we do it. And the most common one is we just don't know what to do next. So we've got 3 or 4 options. We don't know which one it is. So for me, I would go back, look at the diagnosis. I would go forwards and say, would a biopsy help find something which is treatable that's going on here? If it genuinely is treatment unresponsive PBC, I would probably give a trial of steroids because I want to know whether it works or not. And if the steroids don't work, I would stop them. It's not a reason to continue with them, but I want to cover all the bases. And after that, I would be going for a trial of one of the emerging agents, all of which will allow people with cirrhosis into them. So they do not exclude people with cirrhosis. So that we've been very careful in PBC, because in many ways, people with cirrhosis are the ones you most want to control the disease. And so something like setanaxib that I talked about would be a very good candidate, but there are other drugs around. If you control PBC, if you control the disease, the fibrosis, the scarring will naturally sort of move backwards. So the art for treating cirrhosis is to treat PBC and allow nature to resolve itself. So it's all the more reason to take therapies and be involved in trials. But I haven't seen many people who, if any people, who have genuinely got PBC and genuinely had no response at all to urso, bezafibrate, or obeticholic acid. And I would just want to make sure that we are treating the right thing. Always question. The more I I've been talking a lot with our junior doctors about what I call the bell curve of uncertainty, okay? And that when you start in these things, you're right at the bottom of the curve, and the curve is how much knowledge you have. At the bottom of the curve, you know nothing because you've just started, but you know nothing, okay? And so you ask. At the other end of the curve are people like me, and actually I've realized I still know nothing. I've learned a lot, but I still know nothing. I've learned a lot, but there are still things I don't know. And actually that makes me then always question. So the things I used to think are certain are now uncertain. And so I've reached that end of the curve of uncertainty and realized that actually all my old certainties aren't certain. And in the middle are the young doctors who think they know everything and they're yet to learn they know nothing. And it's like my children. My children at the stage are telling me I know absolutely nothing, but at some point they will realize I do know a thing or two about life. And
I have a friend. I have a friend who has retired and took us through the AIDS epidemic. Yep. She was a virologist, and her daughter told her she was clouded by fact.
Yes.
Clouded by fact. Now, a big takeaway, somebody, thank you very much, marvellous stuff. As always, Benton, might we see you in Geordie Hospital?
No. Can I just comment on that?
What is Geordie Hospital?
Just comment on that. Geordie Hospital is a channel. No, thank you for the question. Geordie Hospital is a Channel 4 series, which is about life in a hospital, and it is indeed my hospital, okay? And it is indeed my unit. However, there was a
autograph.
No. So, however, it was, if you like, and this tells you everything you need to know about TV producers, is that it was essentially a beauty contest of people, and I've clearly failed that. And also, it focuses on our surgical colleagues, okay? And it focuses on these, shall we say, running around the hospital wielding a knife, saving lives in miracle procedures. Now, what we do
is that not what you do, David?
No, it's not what I do. What we do is painstaking evolution over time, where we look and question and change, and we do all of that. We don't run around and save lives in a heroic way. And what I do does not make very good television. As I always say, I've got a great face for radio. And so unsurprisingly, myself and my colleagues were not on Geordie Hospital, but some of my life-saving colleagues do. And on that note, would you give me permission just to tell a very quick joke?
Yeah, go on.
Okay. And the joke is, there was a physician, a psychiatrist, a pathologist, and a surgeon shooting grouse on the moor. And the first grouse flies over, and the physician stands up, holds his gun. I'm a physician, holds up his gun and doesn't shoot the bird. And they all go, but it was a grouse, why didn't you shoot it? And he said, well, I was fairly certain it was a grouse. All the evidence pointed it to being a grouse, but I just wanted to be certain before I acted very rapidly in case it wasn't a grouse. So the second bird flies over, and the psychiatrist stands up and doesn't fire at the grouse. And they said, but why, that was a grouse, why didn't you fire? And he goes, well, I know it was a grouse, but I wasn't sure in my own mind it wanted to be shot, and I wanted to check that first. And then the surgeon stands up, birds fly past, and he goes bang, and he turns to the pathologist and said, make sure that was a grouse, will you? Okay.
Now, two things.
The point is, medicine, real life medicine, is slow, incremental gain, research over time. Doesn't make good television. People running around wearing scrubs and theatre stuff makes great television. However, it's not real.
But this is the real television, the here and now, where we are. Collette, you're two modest heroes to us all. Absolutely. Did you get a card of Bamborough Beach in the post this week?
I did. Thank you very much.
That's fine. Now you know.
I've not. I was going to respond, but I've not done.
No. It's important that you know that Northumberland's big in our hearts, okay? Because that was a competition that Angela Eady, one of our girls.
My second joke is a little crueler, which is, what's the difference between God and a surgeon? The answer is, God doesn't think he's a surgeon. And on that note,
On that note, now a big takeaway from today, people, and apart on a serious note now, David, and you've been amazing. I'm not going to keep you. The big takeaway in the last week actually has been this: the fatigue, the tiredness, lack of knowledge that we can do something to help ourselves. Please, everybody, David and I will work in the background. David's a hugely busy man, but we will work something out and we'll get a special done to you. It won't take us long to figure out.
I do wonder, Collette, whether we shouldn't do it almost as a record something on Zoom to put on the website.
Yeah, this is being recorded. This goes on PBC TV. Everything we do is recorded.
Yeah, but just actually, in addition to this, actually have something that is just an instructional thing as well. Okay.
Right. Okay. Yes. And so you wouldn't want it live. You wouldn't want.
No, do it live, but do a live Q&A about it. But I do wonder if the 15-minute guide to fatigue, what you can do as a bite-sized thing,
right?
To
Okay.
actually be able to watch it as well as this might not be very useful.
Right. Okay. Right. Well, we'll have a chat about that when you've got time. Phone me when you can, and I'll take some notes. Thank you very much, everybody. Alan, Chris, Linda in the background. Linda fires me the questions.
And you've had 3 jokes. You've had 3 jokes from me today.
Brilliant session.
We didn't mention anything about the rugby. Did you notice that, Alan?
About
Not
what?
a word about rugby.
I was actually toying with the idea I maybe should put Dave forward for a part in Geordie Shore. Not that I've ever watched that, Dave. I've not got a clue what it is, but I'm aware there's a programme called Geordie Shore.
Oh, you lost me.
No.
Geordie Shore, don't talk about that. I mean, the rugby, for those of you who don't know, my name is David Emrys Jeffries Jones, so you can work out which part of the 4 Nations I'm from. Absolutely. And it wasn't a good weekend for us, and it's not going to be a very good weekend next weekend, because I think Scotland looked very good. It really pains me to say that, but I think Scotland looked very good.
My husband's she's called Steve, but there you go.
And was he as depressed as me after the rugby?
Hmm?
Was he as depressed as me after the rugby?
No, he just kind of no. No, it's not really anymore. He says at his age, it doesn't matter. He just enjoys everybody. But it's interesting in Wales. It's a big thing, rugby, and up here it's private school educated kids that are involved. Quite different. Chris was mean on the rugby field, I'll tell you. He played for the first 15. Right. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you much, everybody.
Thanks for joining us.
The last thing I was going to say is that it never ceases. I mean, as people appreciate, we love doing these. I mean, I don't think that's a stretch for.
Oh no, you've gone. Where have you gone?
Enjoyed doing this. All of the clinicians enjoyed doing this. We feel it's really added something, and we hope that you feel that. What never ceases to amaze me is that we've had a completely different spread of questions. Again, we've covered topics we haven't covered before, and all of these months into this, we are still talking about new things. And I think it's that it just sort of really emphasizes the spread and the value of this, and it just sort of goes where it goes, doesn't it? Maybe I should do a
nearly 2 years.
Like Harry.
We're nearly 2 years doing this, and
I know.
it's been amazing. And I can't thank you enough. Thank you to all the backroom people, but to everybody out there with PBC, your friends, your family. Keep the questions coming in. Next week is Palak Jabadi.
Yeah.
And the week after that is George, and that's an evening one. The week after is at 6 o'clock. His preference. I'm having a few days in York anyway. So
very nice.
Yeah, I love York. And no, I'm not going to the antique jewellery shop. I wouldn't dream of it.
So can I ask everybody, make sure you ask Palak and George really difficult questions just to test them. In fact, I might log in as under a false name and ask really difficult questions.
So if you see a thing called Daft
Palak and George are very good friends of mine, and
absolutely 100%.
but they're very young, enthusiastic pups.